Now, what's going on with you today, mi amigo? Thank you for joining me today. Hope you're staying blessed out there. Today, I want to have a little conversation about Herbo, who's probably the luckiest man alive. So you might have an idea of what exactly I'm talking about, because, this is a story that went viral a few months back, and it, of course, involves Chicago rapper Herbo, who a couple years ago decided to do a little bit of fraud. That's right. Herbo was involved in a wire fraud scheme, which involved himself and a couple other people. The case in question was a federal one, and it involved charges that included aggravated identity theft, and we also had wire fraud charges on top of that. Herbo was essentially out here indulging in a little bit of identity theft, and he ended up getting caught by the Popo, the Federales. They were monitoring this entire thing for years, and they had a bunch of proof, by the way, because the boy Herbo decided to, do some of this fraud through his social media accounts, which was a huge mistake. He literally used his own Instagram with almost 10 million followers to facilitate this entire thing. Now, Herbo's luck, unfortunately for him, ran out in December 2020 during the pandy, because Herbo decided to surrender himself to the California authorities in this wire fraud case. Now, the feds, they were saying that this investigation dated back to 2016, and Herbo was named in this federal fraud case along with 5 other people, and it was being alleged that him and the rest of these defendants used stolen identification to charge more than $1 million worth of exotic services over a 4-year period. More specifically, they were saying that it began in March of 2016 when Herbo and these 5 other individuals allegedly conspired to defraud several businesses and individuals in the United States. And they did all this by utilizing unauthorized and stolen payment card information at an attempt to obtain different types of valuable goods like private jets, exotic rentals, yacht charters, luxury hotels, vacation rental accommodation, private chefs, security guard services, designer puppies. They're obviously living good as hell, right? In other words, Swervo and a gang, they were living pretty lavish. Now, last summer, as some people might know if you're following this story, Herbo ended up taking a plea deal in this case, and he pled guilty to 1 count of wire fraud conspiracy and 1 count of false statements to a federal agent. Now, it was looking like Herbo was gonna actually face time, because the prosecutors, they had essentially asked the judge to send Herbo to federal prison for at least 1 year, and on top of that, they also wanted him to receive 3 years of probation. So it was looking like Herbo was gonna be locked up in the near future. Now, come to find out, and this is when we get to the title of the video, Herbo just got sentenced to 3 years of probation and no prison time at all. On top of probation, however, he's gonna have to pay $140,000 in restitution as a punishment to this scheme, as well as a $5,500 fine. So this right here, which obviously it's a huge win for him, it does come as a very big surprise because nobody really saw this coming. And I even remember seeing certain things from Herbo himself, which was kind of telling me that he was almost mentally getting ready to face time, because it is not every day. I mean, this is a pretty rare case where someone gets caught up in an identity fraud case and they end up not facing time. That's kind of unusual, especially these days, because Herbo was initially facing federal charges that included aggravated identity theft, and that carried a sentence of mandatory 2 years in prison, and then the other wire fraud charge that would provide a sentence of up to 20 years in prison. So for him to come out of this just to get 3 years of probation, I mean, yes, it's 3 years of probation, but damn, this man had God, he had the universe, he had all the forces on his side. And obviously, he probably had a good-ass lawyer. Now, one of the questions that kind of pops up in my head right now is, did Herbo get out of this due to his status? Now, that's a very good question, and it ain't really too far-fetched, because here's the thing about Herbo. He obviously spent a lot of money fighting this case. That's a given. And he would have not been able to fight this case in the way he did had he been an average Joe. But he's not an average Joe, so that's out of the equation. And also, to his credit, Herbo has done a lot for his community, which is something I definitely salute him for, because a lot of his peers and a lot of the rappers in his lane haven't done as much for their community as he has. Because I've been following Herbo for a little bit of time, so I've seen how he's kind of been moving for the last couple years. But I say that to say, him having the resources that he has obviously led him to be able to help his community, which that's a good thing. But that's also potentially the same reason why he versus, let's say, an average Joe wouldn't really face the same repercussions, because they would look at it as, if we, put this guy in jail, who is an undeniable asset to his community, who's that really gonna hurt? Well, that's gonna hurt his community. And that's one of the issues that can come from a situation like this, where a very notable public figure, like literally a famous rapper, Herbo's pretty known, right, ends up not facing time for identity theft. This is a very serious crime right here, and he was facing some serious time. And in the end, he's not gonna face any time apart from the probation and the restitution money that he has to pay. I'm asking myself out loud, in the grand scheme of things, what kind of message does this send to the same community that he's helping? Well, a lot of the specifically young black boys who follow him could see this and subconsciously think to themselves, oh wow, Herbo beat the case? Well, that must mean that the crime that he committed must not be as serious as they claim that it is. Because if it is so serious, how come he didn't face the real repercussions of his actions? The answer to that is because Herbo is a privileged human being. Let's not forget that. He has the money, he has the resources, and he has every single advantage in the book available for him to fight something like this in the court of law. And this is such an important point because a lot of those kids that follow him, they're actually at risk of getting into stuff like this. And since they are, if they don't really see the consequences play out in real life by, for example, observing their favorite artist, Herbo, who made some very bad decisions by getting into this, it's subconsciously gonna send out a very bad message to those kids. Because keep in mind, Herbo is from Chicago. He does come from an impoverished background, and a large percentage of a lot of the kids who follow him, a lot of them are in the same boat that he was once in his past. What are you gonna do when you come from that and you feel like you don't really have any options to make money? Well, you're gonna turn to crime, just like Herbo did in this case when he didn't really need to, which is the strange thing. And it is really easy, especially if you come from an impoverished background, to turn to something like scamming or doing fraud. I'm hearing so many stories of so many young people getting into stuff like this, man. And you know, part of me is like, damn, y'all stupid. What the hell are you guys doing? But they don't just know any better. That's why it's happening. So a big percentage of Herbo's fans, who are kids who come from the same kind of background that he comes from, and most importantly of all, who look like him, fall under this category. A lot of them are unfortunately at risk of getting into crimes like these because of their background. If not crimes like these, then we're talking violent crimes. And a lot of them unfortunately don't understand the real life repercussions of the kind of life that they're leading and living. And that's because they don't have a fundamental understanding and concept of what it means for their future to live this kind of life. So foresight is the word here. And on top of that, they see a story like this where the consequences of actions like that aren't being enforced. And obviously I am not preying on Herbo's downfall. It goes without saying. I'm happy that he's not going to face prison time because he gets to be there for his family, and that's a win for the world in general, because we don't need more absent fathers, especially black fathers. But I'm trying to look at this from a grander scheme perspective, because we might have one individual who got out of this somewhat unscathed at least in comparison to what he was facing. But you got to keep in mind that this one individual, Herbo, does actually speak to a large group of people, and there's a very large group of people who are influenced by him, and they're obviously following the story. I think one way that Herbo could potentially counter this is what he does after the fact. So for him, in a case like this, that would look like maybe he hosts some kind of public speaking event in his city, and he speaks out against crimes of any sort, but more specifically maybe the kind of crimes that he himself got involved in, to make it a little more relevant. Now this would accomplish a couple of things. Most importantly of all, he would be taking a stand against the kind of life that a lot of the young people who follow him are at risk of falling into, that he himself was of course lucky enough to dodge the real repercussions of. It would also, if we're going to look at it from a selfish perspective, it would also be very beneficial for his track record. So if in the future he ever gets caught up in anything, this will undoubtedly be taken into consideration. Touching a little bit on the fraud aspect of this conversation, I think one of the reasons why there are so many young people getting into this type of stuff now is because scamming and doing fraud is way more accessible than carrying out a violent crime, because most people are not stupid enough where they're going to walk into a bank and try to rob the bank in 2024. You got CCTV cameras in every corner. Good luck with getting away with that. And also, most people don't have it in them to be out here robbing people in broad daylight and causing harm to them and taking all their belongings, which that's obviously a very good thing for society. Now, scamming and doing a little bit of fraud, on the other hand, you can do that from your phone in the comfort of your apartment or wherever you're at. You don't have to go outside and physically put yourself at risk. You can tap a couple buttons on your phone or your laptop and boom, you're in. Now what comes with it being so easily accessible to at least try to get into this is that every movement you're making is tracked by the federales. Now I'm saying this because with the state of the world, inflation and all that, there's a lot of people, but specifically a lot of young people, getting into these types of crimes thinking that they're gonna make a quick buck and then dip. Now if you're one of those people who've gotten into this and you've gotten away with it, consider yourself lucky until they come knocking, because that happens 90% of the time now. I mean, just check out this recent story right here. Like literally today, like literally as I'm recording this, the story is like bubbling right now, and it's out of Florida. Okay, Palm Coast, Florida. Shout out to Florida. A young man, a 19-year-old young man by the name of Noah Urban, he was arrested Tuesday and indicted on 8 counts of wire fraud, 1 count of conspiracy to commit wire fraud, and 5 counts of aggravated identity theft. Now, according to the federales, he was a part of a scheme that resulted in the theft of at least $800,000 being divested from at least 5 different people between August 2022 and March 2023, according to the indictment. And by the way, they're saying that he completely acted on his own, so there are no co-conspirators in his case. What can I say? He was out here doing fraud at the highest level possible, and now he faces up to 20 years in federal prison on each wire fraud charge and a minimum mandatory penalty of 2 years in prison for the aggravated identity theft. Now, this young man doesn't look like he'll be able to handle being surrounded by killers, thugs, and the worst of the worst. I could be wrong, but I don't think he's gonna handle it too well, sadly. So is all this worth it? I don't really think so. I think there's better ways to make your money than scamming and doing fraud. As for Herbo, I'm happy that he evaded prison time. Very good for him. But let's not forget that he's a very privileged human being, and I think his status definitely played a part in this for sure. Anyway, there you have the video. If you made it this far, can you do me a favor and drop a like? Thank you. I appreciate that. And if you're new here, by the way, nice to meet you. My name is Blacky Spez. Subscribe if you're new here. Any thoughts on this conversation, guys? What do you think about this Herbo story? What do you think about some of the things that I talked about? Some of my older folks out there, have y'all noticed how a lot of young people are getting into like fraud and stuff like that? Maybe talk a little bit about what you think about that, and, you know, give me your thoughts on this conversation in general. Anyway, I'll see you in the comment section below, and I'll of course catch you on the next one as well. You have a blessed day. Stay safe out there, and yeah, peace. I'm out.